But yeah, I'll pass quickly over to Rona Topaz, who has joined us in a couple of sessions before, and I think is going to talk a little bit about her journey as a performer. Over to you, Rona.
Good evening, everyone. I hope you can hear me. I would be the biggest hypocrite if having scolded other people for not speaking loudly, slowly, and clearly, if I started speaking a million miles an hour and not speaking loud enough. My name is Rona Topaz. I go by pronouns she, her, or they, because I'm very open-minded. And I identify as a physically and I don't identify as mentally disabled, but identify as physically and sensory and vascular challenged, having had problems with memory from having had two mini strokes as a young woman. Um, so I'm just a little bit sort of conscious of the fact that I'm actually not going to be sharing my screen, and I'm trying to sort of get myself on speaker view, and it's not working. So I'm just going to see if I can pin myself. Pin. There we are. I'm pinned. I am pinned. So I want to apologise in advance for the fact that there's not going to be very much excitement in my presentation. It's going to be quite a grim presentation about the need for UBI, particularly for artists and performers like myself, and for disabled people. But it's not going to be. I'm not going to be sharing my screen and showing you a lot of colourful PowerPoint presentations. But what I will be doing at the end is offering you an example of music that I make. So you'll be in receipt of a live performance of a song that I wrote a number of years ago when we first started sort of having to cope with a government in the UK which quite frankly doesn't like disabled people very much, and I think secretly would like disabled people to die off. And I'll come to that in just a moment. I'm going to start with a statistic. 50% of people who are in poverty in the UK, this is as a result of a survey that was done recently, 50% of the people who answered the survey, which was quite a wide sample, were who were in poverty were either disabled people or looking after a disabled person. Now this is no accident, because I would say over the last 10 or 15 years in the UK, we have had a sort of a turn away from a support for anyone who requires what I think is a misnomer. We call it the benefit system. It's not a benefit. It's a social security entitlement, in my view. It's basically meant to be a safety net to make sure that people don't starve, and it was retitled as benefits to get the idea in the heads of people who didn't require state assistance that it was a gift, because that's what benefit is. It's a gift. It's largesse. It's something you don't really need. It's like a perk. So it's misnomerous benefits, and over the last few years, it's been kind of decimated. So we used to have a safety net, and we used to have a social security option. If you were unemployed, you'd claim social security until you were able to go back to work again, and that's been decimated to what I would say is not only is it a bare minimum, but it's got to the point where people have become destitute. Homelessness has gone up by 168% in the last 10 years, and that's because new homes have not been built for people who can't afford their own property. So so what we call social housing as opposed to private homes have not been built. And the welfare state has shrunk further and further and further. So just a little bit about myself. I'm a professional singer, songwriter, and as I said, mobility, hearing, and vascular challenged. And I've been a freelance artist since 2002, working for organisations over the years. Like any artist, sometimes I'm in work, sometimes I'm not in work. And I came to the idea of UBI a few years ago, And I just basically thought, well, would this replace the welfare system, or would it be in addition to the welfare system? And I was reassured that the people I was campaigning with were very much in favour of the idea of it being something that would enrich or improve the existing welfare system. Particularly for people who are on 0 hours contracts or casually employed. So casually means you don't have any employer's rights. If you don't work, you don't get paid. You don't have any kind of opportunity to take time off if you're sick, because you don't get paid if you're sick. You can't go on holiday because you don't get paid holiday time. There's no, you're considered to be a contractor as opposed to an employee, so you have no employee rights. So people like that, with a basic income, would be able to afford things like food and money for heating bills and things like that. I want to answer your question about what I would do with a universal basic income. Well, at the moment, I have another job besides being a performer, and my other job is being a professional political campaigner on behalf of an organisation that campaigns on behalf of disabled people in a particular part of London. So my job is to actually hold politicians to account, and to hold forum meetings, and to generally try to improve the lives of people in this particular part of London. But that gives me a really good substantial income when I'm not working as an artist or performer. So at the moment I'm quite fortunate, but without that income, if I were just relying on my artist income and the welfare system, which is known as universal credit, I would probably be in a situation where I would have to rely on a food bank rather than being able to buy my own food, or I would have to borrow money from a friend to pay the rent, because my money that I would receive from the state to help me pay my rent wouldn't be sufficient because of the decimation of the welfare system. But I'm very lucky to be disabled. Why do you think I'm lucky to be disabled? I'll explain why. We disabled people have something that, well, we have to fight for it. Some people have died waiting for this particular income, but it's called a personal independent payment. And it's kind of like a UBI for disabled people, because it's a guaranteed regular income. You do have to be assessed to qualify for this PIP, or personal independence payment. There are people who are assessors of PIP who have taken large bonuses from their private organizations to fail as many people as possible at the first hurdle. So, in other words, if you fail 15 candidates for PIP within a week, you get a bonus of £450 or something like that. This has been proven to be the case. So they're not the most honest of people. So us disabled people were saying, well, we're not having that. We're going to go and find a way of recording these assessments so that everything that happens in the assessment is going to be on paper, that's going to match up with what's on paper. Because what they were doing is they were having the assessment, and the person would come in and say, I've had 3 strokes, I can't walk, please give me some PIP. And then they would say, person looked perfectly well, perfectly happy, no medical history indicating disability. And that, of course, that person would fail, because the assessor would look at the piece of paper and say, oh, well, that person doesn't qualify for PIP because they're not disabled. So you would have to go to something called a tribunal. Now, tribunals got so frequent because so many people were being failed because of the dodgy assessors and the dodgy assessments, that it would be like a 15-month wait, or a 2-year wait, or a 2.5-year wait for a tribunal. In the meantime, that extra income that disabled people are applying for, they're basically needed in order to survive, because, as I just explained, the welfare system isn't good enough, and wages have been frozen. I think they were frozen for about 7 years, so wages never went up either. So people died, and don't know quite what happened there. I think I froze. Yeah, a lot of people died. It's estimated that 200,000 people died waiting for their assessments, or committed suicide waiting for their assessments for personal independence payment. So I basically got on the UBI train at that point, and I joined the UBI Lab Arts in 2018, and basically I've been kind of like, doing what I can to try to spread the UBI sort of banner since then. I did actually apply for an American version of UBI, which became like an international project, and they offered it specifically to artists and performers. So I put in an application for that, and I was actually quite pleased that they did turn it into a kind of an opportunity for people to apply for it internationally. And I got involved with BN when it went online, because although I can travel, it's not that easy. It's a bit problematic for me to kind of just up and go to Finland. So I became a BN volunteer in 2018, and my main, I wasn't, well, no, sorry, it was 2020, sorry. It was, no, was it 2020 or 2000? Oh, I'm getting my years mixed up, sorry. It was in 2021, it was last year, then I got involved with BN as a volunteer. And my main sort of goal was to introduce the panelists and to make sure that I kept an eye on the question box, but then I was invited to perform at the end of the event as well. So, yeah, I mean, the last session of the BN conference was dealing with performers and how a performer would use UBI if they had it. So to answer your question, because I've got this regular employment at the moment as a campaigner, which is employment that is, as most employment is these days, temporary and due to finish next year. If I had a UBI right now, because I already have PIP as well, it would be it would actually be a benefit. It would be a perk, a bonus. It'd be something that I would spend money on my friends. My friends were sort of money I'd give them my UBI, or I'd go in the studio and record some new songs. So it would be very much a luxury. When my regular job finishes, I will be in poverty again, and at that point, if I had a UBI, in addition to the welfare that I might be entitled to, it would be money that would go towards the luxury of going into a supermarket and buying food, as opposed to being forced to go to a food bank and to have food given to me for free in exchange for whatever it is they want in exchange. There are quite a few food hubs and food banks where I volunteered, where they don't ask for anything in exchange, and they just basically, they limit the food, they ration the food because there is only a certain amount to go around, but you know, you are pretty much entitled to choose whatever you like. Some food banks, I'm not naming names, but there are some food banks that expect something in return, and they do ask a lot of questions, which can be very humiliating and degrading, as is the process of applying for our welfare system, which is called Universal Credit. So I'm just looking at the time. I think I've talked quite a bit, and again, you're probably very bored listening to the sound of my voice and not seeing anything on the screen. So I think I'm just going to sing you a song now, and then open it up to any questions. So this song is called Thatcher's Children. I assume that everyone knew who Thatcher was, but just to refresh your memory, she was Prime Minister from 1979 to 1990. And she was what I would call the architect of the system that we have in place now. She put the ball into motion for people to become more focused on themselves as an individual and less of a sort of a collective mentality. I believe the term neoliberalism might be a term you're familiar with. She was the architect of neoliberalism in the UK, which is sadly, with new legislation being introduced, going towards a direction of the far right, and possibly some people have used the word fascism, but I don't really know whether that's an appropriate word to use, but because we still have general elections, but there's been some question over the validity of those elections and the effectiveness of those elections because of the boundaries which favour the ruling Conservative Party to such a large extent. So I'm going to sing you a song. I'm going to stop talking about politics. Sing you a song. It's called Thatcher's Children. It is a political song. So I'm going to stop the talking, start the singing, and here we go. Looking back over 30 years, shocked as so little has changed. Back then the leaders were children, but old attitudes still remain. No compassion for our needs, truth decimated by greed. Where are the values of necessity, decimated by degrees? New generation, the same as the old, hoisting the barricades up once again. One rule for rich and another for poor. When will we say we can't take any more? New generation, this one more cruel. More of us dying now under their rule. Forgiveness for rich, no mercy for poor. When will we say we can't take any more? Destroying the NHS and welfare state. Ooh, destroying the NHS and welfare state. We saw it coming back then. Now we keep trying, too little, too late. But some fences may never mend, and it continues apace. But too apathetic to care. There's no one to vote in their place. Oblivious and unaware. New generation, the same as the old, hoisting the barricades up once again. Forgiveness for rich, no mercy for poor. When will we say we can't take any more? Some of us know that there are fights we can win. Some have now gone, those who fight on, no, will never give in. Hoisting the barricades up once again. When will we say we can't take any more? New generation, this one more cruel. More of us dying now under their rule. Forgiveness for rich, no mercy for poor. Now we will say we can't take any more. Any more. We can't take any more. And that's me. Thank you very much.
Excellent, Rona. It's funny doing sort of musical performances on Zoom because you just got to go with digital applause, but I definitely felt it was a good round there. And yeah, well, thanks very much for sharing both like a really touching and passionate story and a great performance as well. I think this is the first time that we've had kind of like a song within the creative sharing sessions, and yeah, it's a fantastic, generous thing to do with us. Chloe's had to nip off because she thought the meeting finished at past. I know you've got to be gone in 10 minutes as well. That's right, isn't it? So yeah, I can open it up to any sort of comments or questions from anyone else, if there are any.
Yeah, I mean, just to say, thanks for sharing such an emotive story. I know it's not easy doing that, and it's much harder living it. And I've got friends and family who are who've got disabilities, and yeah, I know how much of a struggle it is. So yeah, my heart goes out to you. But I think a lot can be learned from the systems which aren't working at the moment, and I think that is a real danger that if the wrong government bring in a basic income, whether it gets if it's implemented really badly, it could, fall under the same sort of thing. So I think that's one of the things I've been trying to do when talking to people about basic income, is to sort of try and raise that as an issue. When I know that some people are just dead against basic income for many reasons, some of them good and some of them bad, but when people do talk about certain versions of it, saying actually that's we shouldn't, if that does get proposed, we should resist it and actually demand, and try and raise awareness what I think would be a good basic income, so we can actually demand something which we want, because I know that that's not going to happen easily. So but yeah, that's thanks very much, Rona.
I was going to just sort of make maybe an observation, Rona, that the kind of the narrative that you provided with us there, again, sort of like humanizes and gives a very sort of personal account of kind of what the need for something like basic income might be, and kind of and would hopefully cut across the very numbers-based assessments of why it makes it more of a kind of an issue of ethics and rights than it does of kind of economics, which I think is, again, a really important part of the conversation. But then even within the discussion about basic income, I think this kind of, and this is probably something that UBI Lab Disability is looking at in more detail, but it brings up a really interesting point about, so as you mentioned, the way you would see a sort of basic income working is as a supplement to an already existing welfare package, so not as a replacement but as a kind of an addition. And I found it really interesting hearing from the disability lab, or the panel about disability and basic income at the BN, acknowledging that there would need to be something like UBI plus in order for that to happen. And then the question, I suppose, being raised there is then, well, how is that assessed? Because how do we keep this kind of unconditional element, the non-humiliating, the non sort of corrupt version of kind of deciding who is entitled to that bit without it becoming, well, can you have something that's both unconditional and accessed on the basis of trust? So I don't know, I don't expect an answer maybe from you about that, but I just wondered whether that's kind of something that that's important to you.
I mean, one of the things I noticed when Chloe and Kendall were speaking, with talking about backlash and talking about the kind of humiliation that they receive from the press. It's the same thing in the UK, insofar as the press are run by billionaires. They're run by people who don't want that equality. They're run by people who don't want any kind of a leg up given to the poorest of the poor. So of course they're going to find flaws in any argument that argues for any kind of leveling up, and they're going to go after that leveling up, with a vengeance, really, with a ruthlessness and a cruelty. So, I mean, what I was basically sort of anticipating when you were talking, Andy, was people might come out and say, well, disabled people don't need a UBI because they already have PIP. Well, I mean, for some of us, that's true, we already have PIP. But why can't we? I mean, I buy cashew nuts, but they only cost £2.50 in this country. They don't cost anything like 25 Canadian dollars, which I don't know what that would be in the UK, but that would be it would be a lot more than £2.50. But why are we not entitled to have the luxury of being able to go to a posh restaurant and take our friends out to lunch? Why should that be denied to us? Because we're disabled, because we're poor. These are accidents of birth, and we're products of a system which is rigged against us. So, I can hear people sort of say, you've already got PIP. Why do you need a UBI? Well, why not? Why not? And I think that a UBI, keeping the universality bit. I think the idea of a UBI plus is probably not a good idea, because I can see the arguments for it, but I also feel that people who are in receipt of PIP and in receipt of employment support allowance, or universal credit as it is now, would benefit from a UBI if it's at the right rate. The right level of UBI would benefit everyone. It would be like, you know, play money to the richest of us, but to the poorest of us, again, it would mean going to a supermarket and buying food. If we don't have if I don't have my other job to fall back on, I wouldn't be able to afford to just go into a supermarket to buy food. I do have my other job, and I went into a supermarket and I bought food, and it cost me £71 for a week of shopping, which I don't know what that is in dollars, but £71. Andy, you know what £71 is, and you know, for one person. So, you know, do the maths if you're more than one person. But yeah, for £71, which I can afford to do at the moment. But when my job finishes, who knows?
Thanks, Rona. Yeah, I think it'd be really interesting to continue to sort of pick up on this sort of what the right amount is, and kind of who is contained within that right amount at some point. But it's definitely getting more into the kind of larger debates on basic income. But I think what you brought up at the end there as well is something that I kind of thought you really nailed early on, is just this the cost of living on the increase, and the precarity of existence for all but the most well off is becoming something that's a real is mainstream news at the moment, and the rise in it is something that, again, you'd hope would sort of create more empathy and more understanding of kind of what this kind of idea of what luxury might be, as opposed to sort of basic needs. And I think what I've picked up on from both of your presentations today is this where does luxury come into the conversation around basic kind of needs? Like, we need bread and roses, and it's kind of like it's a basic need to sort of be able to record a song, especially if you've got such a great voice, and that's that's a basic necessity that you would need to do, whereas some people would see it as a luxury. So I think they've brought up really interesting sort of nuances in the conversation about basic income. I really appreciate that. I know you might have to sort of leave us quickly, Rona, but I didn't know whether there's anyone else that just wanted to sort of take the opportunity to. Yes, Ray.
Hiya. I just wanted to pick up on this thing about thinking about luxuries as and things that we shouldn't spend our money on, being drugs and alcohol and parties, going to the pub, that kind of stuff. And I don't know whether COVID has changed things a bit for people. So I'll give you I'm a single mum, and I've been on universal credit for ages, and I've just got a job as well. So I'm also a creative producer and a theatre maker. And so I kind of feel like I've had a bit of an income lift, and partly that money. And so what I'm spending on at the moment is actually going to the pub, and I'm going back out and I'm reconnecting with people, particularly after a pandemic, where you're this notion that actually a lot of alcohol, we use it for therapeutic connections with each other. Do you know what I mean? The pub is a big part of our culture. And actually being a mum, I've been stuck inside every night for years. Do you know what I mean? I'm only just, sort of being able to go out again. And we've also been disconnected from the pandemic as well. And I think because of the pandemic, there's a bit more understanding for people who have been isolated, whether that's because you're a mum or you're disabled or you're elderly, that the people who were isolated prior to the pandemic, do you know what I mean, that we need. And so, I guess this responds to, I think you already said it, Kendall, in your worrying about who you're trying to persuade. Do you know what I mean? It's I think if we worry too much about offending people, do you know what I mean, where it can take the argument. But so I've been thinking about that a lot as well. I just had a friend who came back from Ireland, and I was like, what did you do? And she's an activist, and she's written a lot about work and stuff. And I was like, what were you doing? She was like, I was just going around the pubs. And she was like, but, that's where all the organising happens. And I'm like, well, yeah, of course it does. But I'm just quite interested in this, when we appeal too much to people who consider, the deserving and the undeserving poor, I think there's a lot more conversation to be had out of what do we need, you know, social space for? What do we use alcohol for? Like, I think it's also like in Europe, they have the square, don't they? Like in Italy, and often there's like a central part, and our like central place in Britain is the pub, which is not great for mums and it's not great for kids because they're not usually welcome in the pub. But generally it's the place where we connect with each other. And I think, yeah, just where we are, everybody is reconnecting at the moment. And so yeah.
I just want to come back, and I've got another meeting to go to, so I'm going to dash, but I just wanted to ask you, who are the undeserving poor?
No, I think this notion of, I think it's quite 18th century, actually. I've just done a historical project that was like looking at Hogarth. And I think this is the point where we're like, those people who spend their money on gin don't have any money. Right. Okay, but some people who work, do you know what I mean? They are like, I think it's really quite beyond Victorian in our consciousness of how do you spend your money? Do you deserve it? Yeah.
It was an old Victorian kind of way of understanding the poor and the deserving poor.
Yeah, my other meeting has started, so thank you all very much.
Thank you, Rona.
Thank you for having me, Andy.
Well, thanks for a brilliant presentation and song. Hopefully we'll have you back, and send us a link as well to it. We'll share it. Thank you. See you, Rona. But yeah, I think, sorry, Ray, that's kind of a really, a good point that you're bringing up again about what the kind of,
Sorry, send you a link to what, sorry?
To the song.
Oh, right, okay, yeah.
Thanks, Rona. But yeah, this idea of what things that might be seen as luxuries or guilty pleasures or excessive, kind of behaviors are sometimes play basic, or fulfill very basic sort of needs and functions. So I kind of feel like, the role that art might have in sort of digging into the detail around that, humanizing those stories, kind of pulling these things out that are actually, have a lot of different interpretations and are actually quite subjective, and being able to kind of create forums so that people can understand that is something that we could really put our sort of efforts into. I don't know if anyone's aware, but the South Korea presidential election at the moment has two candidates that are both riding on a universal basic income ticket or a basic income ticket. So I think one of the questions we've asked previously of kind of these places that are either doing pilot studies or that are have versions of basic income or things that we might is anyone really measuring the impact that that's having on creativity, or where are artists getting involved in this process to sort of understand it? Because I think a lot of the time artists might be seen as, they'll be able to illustrate or kind of disseminate the kind of the findings from this, but actually at what point, one of the things that we talked about with UBI Lab Arts is, at what point should artists be involved in this process, and are there places where we could get and measure the impact, not just on creativity for artists, but that artists could be part of that process in terms of understanding how a basic income sort of operates in the real world.